Now, a warm welcome to all our BBE colleagues globally. Many are present here, some are joining us via live streaming, and some travelled from our international offices to be here in person. Steve, Morne, Marle, Hans, and Johan. Is Johan here? Welcome to you guys. Johan, great to see you as well. It's also a pleasure to welcome our business partners, Agila Capital, especially Tsecho and Asa, and our BBE Energy colleagues, Jürgen and John. Thanks for attending. Next, we are honoured to have our associates and industry colleagues and friends here today. I'm not going to mention your names, but it's heartwarming to have you with us, and we look forward to the afternoon spending some social time with you. Then a very special welcome to Rod and Betty Burton, all the way from England, to Stephen and Sheila Bloom, to Frank and Louise von Glen, to Russell and Shalana Ramsden, and to Richard and Tersa Gunnison. It's indeed wonderful to be celebrating BBE's past and future with you today. Stephen, Rod, Frank, Russell, and Richard, we recognize your bravery and the vision in creating such a special company, and your wisdom and leadership over the past 30 plus years, giving the new generation of BBE everything we need to continue into the future. BBE has forever been proud of our unique culture. We have a family-like business feel. We have an open door policy where everyone has free access to colleagues with specialist experience and knowledge to learn from. What a privilege. We have been free-spirited with no red tape and no corporate bureaucracy all these years, enabling us to make decisions on the fly. We are agile and adaptable to our clients' needs and any circumstances. These principles, being instilled in us by our leaders, are the real differentiators that give us the competitive edge. Today is but a snapshot moment in the story of BBE, and we are celebrating all the successes we have achieved to date, building great people, creating true specialists, and designing and building amazing things. We therefore also recognize everybody in this room and our colleagues that could not be physically here today for your role in the past, the present, and the future story of BBE. We have always resisted being corporate with big company ways, hence visions and missions were not in our vocabulary. However, if I have to put our vision into words, it would be something like this: to build on the legacy of the rich history that made BBE a world leader in mine ventilation and cooling, owed to our formers and leaders. To allow our people to grow to their maximum potential, which they all have in abundance, and to continue to deliver the highest quality and value to our clients, which built the brand. We can all feel very proud of what has been achieved since the day Rod, Stephen, and Frank created BBE, and of what will be achieved for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to reveal what will be a pleasant surprise to most of you, if we can focus on the screens over there.
To create lasting impressions within the earth itself and in the lives of others, past, present, and future, is no small feat. From a modest starting point, Burton Engineering finds itself in a position of constant evolution. It's worth celebrating the pages that we have already filled so far. Founded with fervor and a deep concern for safety within the mining industry, 1989 saw BBE finding its feet through our enthusiastic involvement and precise execution with anyone who needed us. While building our global reputation as an industrious and highly focused group of individuals, our founders recognized a similar passion and zeal in others, and so breathed life into BBE and every mine we touched. leading the vanguard with a mind sharper than steel and a soul that burns for progress, his leadership igniting passion and enthusiasm in everyone around him. Stephen is a source of immense strength at the heart of BBE. As a paragon of stoic compassion, Stephen has instilled in us the perfect balance between appreciating each other and maintaining a practical vision for the future. When it comes to creating history with BBE, Rod quite literally wrote the book. Embodying an unparalleled love for what we do here at BBE, Rod showed us the way a captain steers his ship. Hands-on and with a keen mind on the task. In co-founding BBE with Stephen, Rod has carried with him a story of perseverance, professionalism, and ultimately excellence. This has become the story of who we are today. Following in his footsteps is the surest way to keep our history safe and light the way forward. Along their journey, Rod and Stephen were joined by Frank, who effectively just made things work. Frank brought with him an incredible aptitude for precision and efficiency, which he pairs with a profound sensitivity to those around him. Frank's depth of intelligence and diligence towards mining safety saw him become the last word in all things technical, as he inevitably became our source of leadership and a legend to all within the mining industry. Another epic source of power situated right in the middle of BBE is Russell. To find anyone prouder of who we are and what we do is a challenge. A man who's mastered logic makes it seem like magic. Magic is precisely what Russell brought to BBE. Taking hard sums and creating insightful solutions is the short way of describing his efforts. To describe all we've inherited from Mr. Cooling would take an eternity. Let's skip the stairs. To break the mold entirely, Richard eventually joined this team and brought with him an entirely unique approach that encouraged clarity, passion, and a deep interest in all that life as an engineer has to offer. The importance of life and the world around him is never lost to Richard. This unforgettable energy serves as strong encouragement to joyfully embrace what is still ahead of us. While a culture of independent, free-spirited growth has manifested as passionate and creative engagement with our work, the solid foundation our directors have left behind ensures our ethics never waver. This fine balance we've achieved in the structure of BBE has provided the stability and strength we need to always give our people the freedom and support required to reach new heights. So far, the pages they've filled have already changed the world and changed our lives in many ways. The pages they've left blank for us are waiting.
I hope that was a good surprise, but we'll speak about that just now. When Stephen, Frank and Richard started handing down the reins to the younger generation a few years ago, we used the acronym SFR to refer to the trio. When I told Rod this, he fondly remembered that the password to BBE's first finances spreadsheet was SFR, obviously for Stephen, Frank and Rod at the time. This inspired the name of our book, So Far, with the SF and the 3 R's obviously standing for Stephen, Frank, Rod, Russell and Richard. This is the story of BBE so far. I would now like to call Andrew to say a few words about Richard. Andrew, if you can please come up.
Thank you, Wynand. Apologies. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Lovely to see you here all today. Some old faces and some new ones. And it's up to me to try and paint a picture for Richard, of Richard maybe. So I suppose for an introduction, you have to start at the beginning. Richard was born a long time ago in Stockport, which is near Manchester in England. He attended school there and then eventually went to the Imperial College in London, where he graduated as an electrical engineer in 1976. In 1977, he immigrated to South Africa with his parents and started his career in mining at Goldfields. Over 20 years or so, he worked his way from the shafts of Driefontein into the head office engineering department and held various positions, finally reaching the group consulting mechanical and electrical engineer. He's described himself along the way as being electrically educated and mechanically trained. So still, he's veered off his path, but certainly excelled where he went. He was or is I think still, a fellow of the MVS and was the president there in 93, 94. So in 1999, Richard joined BBE, which means he has 2 years to go to a full quarter century at the company. 2007, BBE Projects was started, and he ran it as managing director until sometime last year. There is no doubt a long list of company achievements, successes, highlights, and inevitable lowlights. I'm not going to detail all of those now, but I think it suffices to say Richard and the projects company have given those of us who work there and with him opportunity for adventure across the African continent, satisfaction in producing useful refrigeration and fan systems for a wide range of clients, and all the while never losing a sense of excitement and enthusiasm for what we do. So Richard really embodies what the Blue Company is about. Enough of the work stuff, and Richard is known as much for his personality as for the work that we produced at BBE. So while I was writing this introduction yesterday, I looked up the word polymath, and it means a person of wide knowledge or learning. I think that fits Richard quite well. He looks surprised. Nevertheless, I've got a couple of stories. He is completely at ease speaking across the widest range of subjects: genealogy, the arc of the sun in the sky, complicated business, finance, music, of engineering, of course, just about anything you can think of with just about everybody you care to know. There is a caricature drawing of him hanging in his office that I often look at, and I think it captures him so perfectly. He's sitting on his old silver Lamborghini, holding a glass of wine in one hand and binoculars in the other. He has a camera around his neck, a tool bag over his shoulder with a soccer ball, a bicycle, and an aeroplane on show, and a fat grin on his face. So these few stories I've collected might go some way to recreate that illustration for you. Firstly, the love of cycling, which I believe started at an early age, and the story of that time was at age 11, the Gunderson family had to go on holiday to Wales, and his parents at that time didn't have a car large enough to support his bicycle, so he rode 200 kilometers to Wales. Unsurprisingly, it took him the whole day, and I'd hoped that somehow he got back more easily. I think this captures 2 or 3 traits quite nicely. So the interest in cycling, obviously, but a can-do attitude and determination to succeed. So those endure through to this day. He's apparently quite the musician, something I've not experienced firsthand for myself, but can play the piano and cello. Did you know that?
I did not know.
No. And apparently he's played at local clubs when he was a student to support his various vices, I suppose, and can get any party going. So there's a grand at the back there, Richard. Maybe later we'll get the treats. Richard has a passion for fast cars, driving fast, which started with a 3-wheel Reliant Robin Regal, bought at the age of 16 or 17. The Lamborghini, obviously, which was bought many years ago and receives considerable attention. And Tertia, next to him over there, has reported she's granted him many day passes. There's another word for that, but he's had some of those for time getting it on the road and tinkering and torturing and what have you. Trips around Cape Town. I hear there's trips to Santa Agnata, where Lamborghini is made. So, yeah. I think that passion probably only rivaled for his enjoyment of wine and collecting it. And Tertia revealed that Richard's motto is to rather spend a fortune on a good bottle of wine, and as a consequence he's forever fixing broken household items and refusing to hire contractors to do the work for him and save the money and put it into the collection. And The collection is substantial, so it must work. Richard gives his time freely for community upliftment, serving for many years on the Fuchs Foundation Board, which is a grant-making organisation contributing to youth empowerment, child development, innovation in health services, and promoting excellence in higher education. More recently, he's been instrumental in starting and running the Stimulator project, which builds interactive virtual models of everyday things. I think you can think of airports and toasters and I don't know what you name, with the aim of promoting interest in how they work and ultimately science, technology and maths, as the organisation suggests. There's no doubt much more, but I'll end by mentioning Richard's dedication to his family. I know he's a very proud grandfather to 6 little girls between the ages of 1 and 5, one short of a netball team, having first raised 2 boys. There is always a gathering, getaway, or adventure being planned. So please welcome Richard and Tertia, sitting over here. And Richard, if I could have you on stage, please. Oh, which one? Yeah, okay.
Oh, well, that's for you. Where do we look? All right, here we go. Sure. The good news is I was given 10 minutes for the duo. I think Andrew's used 8 of them, so I'm going to keep mine very short. Now, jokes aside, I'm also intrigued, Andrew. I didn't hear much talk about work in your... is that how it comes across? Anyway, yeah, I knew I was going to be hauled up here at some stage, and I had a good idea who the audience was going to be. And I just want to share the enjoyment that I've had with BBE. And that's why they can't get rid of me, because it actually is such a pleasant place to work. The tasks that we're doing, the places that we're going to, the improvements we're making to the places we visit, it's a remarkable role to be playing. It's actually very satisfying. And yeah, I'm not part of the founding team. I came in about 10 years after the start of the company. But I consider myself the founder of the projects division because that was a major change in how the company was behaving. We took on the responsibility for actually building what we were designing, and we could actually, proof of the pudding was, give us the money, we'll go out there and build it for you. I mean, we developed so much trust with our clients, and slowly but surely over the years, we are in a privileged position of almost being approached to say, here's the next chapter we need, can you build one of these for us? And we say, yes, what a pleasure, and get on with it. And yeah, maybe my traveling bug was the reason we went off to places like Ghana. Our first breakaway was in Obuasi. Then we were seen in Tanzania at Bulyanhulu mine. Then we went off to Marle to do Randgold's work there at Lulu mine. And gosh, and then Andrew got the bug. He said, no, this African travel is not for me. He said, here we come. So off to Canada we go. And that was quite a good one because, you know, as soon as I got the job, being over there, negotiated, handshook, signed the contract, got back here, then COVID came in and he had to do it all by teams. So well done, Andrew. That was actually quite an achievement and something we actually still made a name for ourselves. So, the thought that keeps spinning through my mind is the trust that you can build with people. Either it's your clients or it's your suppliers. And it goes a long way in business. I'm doing a terrible job at the moment at a mine in the Limpopo province. It is managed by an intermediary, and it is so painful. The bureaucracy that goes with it just slows the whole job down to a standstill. I said, where's the trust that people used to have in the past? I want one of those. I'm buying a Mercedes motor car. I'm not going to come to the factory and tell you how to build your car. When the car's ready, come and tell me, and I'll come and pick it up. And that's what we do for most of our clients. It's just a few of them haven't got to know us that well, and they have this intermediate stage where we're overly managed, and we're reporting to bureaucracy rather than building our fridge plants. So if I can get any message to the youngsters, please don't give in to this new wave. Prove yourselves, show that you're capable of doing what you're doing, show them your track record, and try and keep things as simple as possible. So, Wynand, yeah, it's been a wonderful chapter in my life. I'm looking here at Bodo, where he moved. Voda, where did you move to? He was my boss at Goldfields for 15 out of the 22 years that I was there. And that was a wonderful training ground. But he did the same thing. He let me go. He said, I trust you, go over there. He said, I can put you on a plane and send you anywhere. He said, you'll sort it out and you'll come back with some sort of plan of action as to how things are going to go. And so I've had 2 jobs in my life, one with Goldfields and one with BBE. And they've both been fantastic. And I'm lucky, I'm privileged, and I'm a very happy chappie, and you won't get rid of me yet.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Richard. Thank you, Andrew and Richard. And now can I ask Mark Butterworth to come up and introduce Russell Ramsden.
I wasn't expecting that. Hi. I'd like to introduce Russell to the people maybe that don't know him, but Russell is from Manchester and he studied in Liverpool, which is where he obtained his first-class honours degree in nuclear physics, and that was in 1967. And it was while in Liverpool that Russell developed his taste for fine football and not so fine beer. And these 2 tastes have remained with Russell to this day. Now, 1967 was the golden age of nuclear energy, and after graduating, Russell moved back to Manchester to join the Nuclear Energy Group, where he stood out as a young and upcoming physicist. Now, unfortunately for the Nuclear Energy Group, after 5 years, Russell became frustrated, and I rather suspect that was with the football that he was witnessing in Manchester at that time. So he packed up his bags. He was offered a job by the Atomic Energy Board in South Africa. He wasted no time in grabbing this opportunity and boarded the SA Vaal. Now, the SA Vaal, for those that don't know, is a ship. And a ship is what people used to come to South Africa on, or in the 1960s. So he arrived raring to go at the Pelindaba nuclear research site outside of Pretoria, and that was in 1972. He worked on many valuable projects, but a highlight of Russell's time at Pelindaba was that, and a lot of you will probably not know, that Russell is one of the most qualified drivers in South Africa. And that is the truth. He's got the papers to prove it. And he was selected to drive one of the facility's emergency evacuation buses. Now, I've travelled many thousands of miles with Russell as a passenger. And the thought of Russell in the driver's seat of a bus full of panicking people tearing down from Pelindaba towards Hartbeespoort Dam is a thought that I can't comprehend. But anyway, I mean, were these people panicking, screaming at the thought of this nuclear Armageddon that was about to beset them? Or was it Russell's clutch and brake coordination? I really don't know. Anyway, after calling it a day at the Atomic Energy Board, Russell made the very brave career move for a nuclear physicist to the Chamber of Mines Research Organisation, where he joined the best team ever assembled. And may I concede, this team was probably the Manchester City of ventilation, cooling, and all these related disciplines. And of course, this team still plays today, but they play in the BBE colours. And that's why we're here to celebrate that today. Now, personally, I've known Russell for 40 years, and I've worked with him for most of these years. And I think, as with most of us here who've worked with Russell, I've enjoyed our time, especially seeing him lead selflessly from the front, taking responsibility and openly sharing his experience and knowledge, whether it's Russell's deadly accurate rules of thumb, which I think many of us know and use almost on a weekly basis, or whether it's his life skills. And the one that famously comes to my mind is that while preparing with me for a difficult meeting, telling me to sit next to the chairman. Well, I won't mention this guy's name. He may be here today, but I don't see him. He says, if you do that, he won't shout at you. Now, it worked. And that advice has stayed with me right through to this day. And Russell, on behalf of everybody here, I'd like to thank you. It is still a great pleasure knowing you. And I'd just like to say that Russell is a proud family man. And Russell and Shalana are expecting, within seconds, I believe, their 6th grandchild. So, thank you.
Russell, can you please come up?
Oh, okay. There you go, Russell, your book. You have to come up here.
Come up first.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Wow. You know, first of all, I'd like to sort of point out, yes, I do support Manchester City. And Mark, who gave those very kind words, supports Liverpool, who are second, behind us. You know, Mark told some interesting stories, and I've got to admit I'm not the best driver in the world. Maybe the second best or third best, but certainly not the best. And I admit that. But you know, what I'd like to say here is it's amazing to see how BBE's grown, to see all the people, friends, and colleagues of BBE. You know, when I first joined in 1994, wow, that's a long time ago. In 1994, we could have filled this settee with our friends and ourselves and had a meeting. And it's amazing how the company has grown to the stage of what it is today. And, you know, from being a family business almost, as Mark pointed out, to being an international company with offices in Australia, Canada, South Africa, and you'll probably tell me even more places. The offices in Australia cover most of the country, not only Perth, but Brisbane, and have you got people in Adelaide?
We do.
And Adelaide. So, you know, it really is a country, a big sort of organisation which has established itself. And, you know, one of the problems with many companies, if you look at the growth of companies, is lots of small companies start off and they're successful. But the biggest challenge is when you move from being a small company into a big company, still keeping the same ethics and the same essential knowledge of detail and working on this. And this is something which I think BBE has managed to achieve. And that is why you are so successful today. It really is a pleasure to see all these people, to see the original friends where we spend so much time with Stephen and Rod and Frank. And we have many stories, but I'm not going to tell those stories today, because A, they'd take too long and it might embarrass the innocent. You know, so what I'd like to say is thank you very much, and I'd like to be here again in another 28 years to see how BBE's grown, and probably will need then a football stadium, maybe Manchester City's football stadium to accommodate everyone. And with that, I'd like to say thank you to Mark, thank you to Wynand, thank you very much. Thank you for Stephen, for all the sort of advice and goodwills, and Rod and Frank. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Russell. Thank you so much, Mark and Russell. Now I'd like to call Marle Women to come up and to introduce Frank.
Thank you, Wynand. It's been quite a privilege to be part of this journey with BBE and writing this book and being part of it, so thank you for that opportunity. So Frank grew up in Johannesburg. He actually studied at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. There he met his wife, Louise, and they've now been married for 42 years, which is an amazing achievement in itself. They then went to Pretoria, where he did his 2 years military service, and 5 years later they had their identical twin daughters, which is now 35 years old and very successful working overseas. He then, in parallel, in Pretoria, went to the Chamber of Mines, and that's where Rod and Stephen and Frank met the first time. Just a few words from our book is Frank is a very intelligent, brilliant man. Everybody sees Frank as the glue of BBE. Rod and Stephen saw Frank as a very desperately needed resource, and they went to meetings privately at the time, just before BBE started, to work on, how BBE will be established, which we are all very thankful for here today. Frank is a very intelligent man. He's by far the hardest worker in BBE, not just in the past, but forever. He is super reliable with a proverbial memory of an elephant. He forgets nothing. Frank is always a gentleman, and he can be very firm when necessary. He's also a very good judge of character, and none of us would sit here without him. Frank hates wasteful expenditure, and he makes sure that every rand spent in BBE goes to perfect use. Frank is a perfectionist, an academic, and he has very great rapport with clients. And he's a very good people person. He loves his family. He could also be the life and soul of the party, as Rod would know from his wedding. One thing to show Frank's commitment to a project is at San Rafael's tin mine in Peru. Frank studied Spanish on a tape, just to make sure he can give a course on airflow and pumps. By the end of this course, he realized that everybody could speak very fluently in English. Frank is also one of the rare bodies that has a very robust physiology. He can actually naturally work or naturally operate at very high altitudes, as 4,000 and 5,000 meters above sea level, and not even get any altitude sickness or heat stress, which is very unique. Most of us suffer. Frank's wife Louise speaks of him as a profound, with profound kindness and abounding fairness, of still waters running deep. She describes him as a wonderful and devoted father, and a superb role model for hard work, persistence, and resourcefulness. When he does something, he does it properly, and his daughters take after him. Frank has got over 40 years experience in mine ventilation and control. He's written over 30 papers. He's been part of the Mine Ventilation Society for since the inception of the MVS, and he's well known throughout the world. We want to thank you, Frank, for everything you've built into us, everyone, not just the people working at BBE, but also in the industry. You've really made a difference in people's lives, and we are truly thankful for that. We just want to, as a token of our appreciation, just hand you something. Thank you.
Thank you, Marle. Thank you, Wynand. My daughters, whom Marle mentioned, when BBE started, they were still quite young. And I used to nip out to the office on a weekend when they were having their nap. And at the time, I felt guilty about doing that. However, fortunately or unfortunately, shortly after that, I felt guilty when I didn't go into the office at the weekend. So I need to say thank you to Louise for the support that you and the girls have given me, and putting up with me being at the office so often, and when I get home I sit at my desk in the office, in the study, so thank you. Going back a bit, there was a time when our mining industry in South Africa was going through a lot of turmoil. Groups were merging and disappearing, and at Comro there were a number of retrenchments that happened. I successfully avoided being retrenched twice, and I was quite happy on my path forward as being a researcher at Comro. One afternoon, Stephen called me into his office, the environmental engineering director's office, and Rod was there, and they asked me if I would be interested in joining them. I felt very honored that you had asked me, and thank you for that. I also felt very nervous at the responsibility of forming this company and going out on my own into the big wide world. I didn't really know much about this wide world. I remember asking Stephen and Rod whether we were going to advertise in the yellow pages. And they said, no, we'll probably go for something a bit more technical. At the time, I don't know whether we discussed how big we intended to be, but certainly I never envisaged this forum here. It went beyond, it really, over time, it's gone beyond what I had ever thought we would grow to. And that, together with everybody's professionalism and dedication, it's due to colleagues as well as clients who have brought us to this. What we did discuss at the time was that BBE was going to be the best at what it does. We would provide the best advice to our clients, the most practical advice, based on engineering, technical, scientific standards, and that certainly we have achieved. I really have been privileged to be working with all of my colleagues, your professionalism and dedication. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I looked at the yellow pages the other day. There's still no ventilation engineers there.
Thank you so much, Marle and Frank. I'd now like to call on Ray to come up and to introduce Rod.
All right, so I'm going to talk about Dr. Rodney Burton. I have to start with the expression that Stephen actually coined. Without Rod Burton, BB wouldn't be what it is today. And I think for many of us, we actually don't know Rodney Burton. He was a co-founder, he was a director of BBE from 1990 until 2004, which was probably before many of us actually got to know him. So I have to tell a little bit about his background, and especially some of the qualifications is quite impressive. So he graduated as a mechanical engineer from the University of Wales, which I was actually there last week. We drove past it. And in 1974, he obtained a PhD there. And just to put that into context, I was in grade 1 at that stage. So he was miles ahead on that. Then he worked for Rolls-Royce for a spell. And then he immigrated to South Africa in 1979, where he joined Combro, and you've heard some of the other previous speakers talk about that. He also carried on studying, because PhD is obviously not enough, so he did an MBA at Wits and got that in 1988. And then over the years he progressed in Combro, and he got up to the position of Chief of the Division of the Environmental Department, and eventually by 1988 he was promoted to Manager of the Executive Research Office. Hopefully I've got that all right. Anyway, so like I said, he's one of the two founders of BB. He's also a master storyteller. If you've ever been to a party with him, you would have discovered this. And we know that he is a committed lifelong diarist, which means that you write diaries every day about things that happen. And he's written a diary, and he's done every single year of his time at BBE, except one year, 1999. And we still don't know why we didn't have anything in his diary for that year. Got married. All right, finally I can cross it out and put the reason in. Anyway, so I got one of the excerpts out of his diary here, and not sure which year this is, but it must have been one of the early years. And this one says, during our first year of operations, our friend and landlord, Mel Higginbotham, got us a job refurbishing the evaporative cooling system at the main post office in Uppington. Sounds like a tough job. BB did all the design work. I recall Stephen and I helping to assemble some of the plastic pipework and nozzles, and also packing the trailer with all the equipment late one night. I can just visualize that. Yeah. When the work was finished, I went to Uppington as the commissioning engineer now. It was hot as hell, so when the system was turned on, I and my clipboard were greeted by some very happy people, all wishing that they'd brought pullovers that day. Anyway. All right, must be a fascinating book to read. But seriously, Rod, the way he's defined by some of the BB veterans that knew him, he was the businessman amongst us. I guess that's where the MBA kicked in, and all his experience. He's got an enduring professionalism. He's got a reputation of being hands-on, literally, figuratively. And as a financial director, he helped us in one of our most important tasks, and that's cash flow. And that's probably one of the reasons why tasks were always on time, is to actually have money to actually pay salaries. Rod accumulated over 30 years of professional experience in the mining industry. He's long been acknowledged as a specialist in the design of mine ventilation and refrigeration systems, as well as the design of industrial and commercial ventilation. I guess that was the post office job. Rod's particular interest, including the prediction of the ventilation and cooling requirements for massive ore bodies and the use of controlled recirculation of ventilation air. Rod retired from BBE 2004, and he's very devoted to his wife Betty, and they moved back to the UK. But even after his retirement, I still recall Rod trying to solve puzzles and heat things, and he had this puzzle about the tube, the underground London railway system, which has been around for hundreds of years, and it's getting hotter and hotter. Anyway, so Rod was going to have a crack at solving the heat problem there. And there was a big competition on at the time, and I see they're still trying to solve the heat problem. But anyway, I remember you came up with some pretty good ideas for that. I also consider Rod as a human dictionary for the obscure triviality type things. Like even the other day I was he got this expression, to freeze the balls of a brass monkey. What does that even mean? And probably Rod actually knows what that means. Anyway, you can tell us if he does. Anyway, so it's just wonderful having the two of you here today to join in the celebration. Oh, there's one more thing I just got to mention, and it's not in here because he only told me today. Rod and Betty, now they're activists. So he went through a little bit of a scare with cancer, and apparently after that they've been doing some work with activists in that field, and they were stamping their feet in Parliament and nearly tossed into jail the other day. So well done and all that. So, I'd like to just invite Rod up to receive a gift and say a few words.
Thanks, Wynand. Honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for that introduction there. I think you've already heard that obviously I left quite a long time ago, so a lot of people here don't actually know me at all. And I'll be speaking a little bit differently because, although I was here for about 15 years, I haven't been here for a very long time. So I can only really speak about that sort of past time. I think the first thing I can say is that it certainly was hard work to start with, but the best word to describe it was fun. When Stephen and I started, it was great fun. It really was. It was a very steep learning curve. At first, we had no staff, indeed no employees at all. Our first location was mentioned before, 2 rooms in a shared house. We only moved into our own offices in early '91, and then to our first property in Surrey Avenue in '92. We didn't even give ourselves formal job titles. We didn't have business cards or a letterhead. We had no rules for how much leave we could take. We just sort of didn't come in. And we accepted every single project, big or small, and shared out our work on the basis of the first person to blink. The financial side of BBE activities were handled very efficiently, though, by the Chief Financial Director, who was me. I think that was because I very stupidly owned up to having an MBA. I should have kept very quiet. The finances at that time involved me writing the credits and debits in a notebook. And it was one of those very early notebooks that don't need a battery. We didn't have anything as formal as salaries. Once a month, I would balance the books, or rather the notebook, and we shared out what was available. And back in those days, of course, we used those old-fashioned things that have just been disposed of here in South Africa, which are cheques. Now, the very first BBE cheque was for membership at the local gym. The Virgin Gym, I think, on the corner of by the Morningside Clinic, is it? And Stephen and I went there and proudly gave them the cheque. We inspected all the equipment first, of course, to see if it was suitable and it would do the job, build up the muscles, keep us fit for all the BBE project work we were going to do, or anticipated we'd do. And we never went back. Ever. Have you ever been back, Stephen? The second cheque that we wrote for BBE was much better intended. It was to a bottle store. Communications were not fast or reliable, obviously, back in those days. Internet access and emails and even cell phones only became generally available some years after we started. So we had to rely on snail mail and unreliable telefaxes. I remember in the early days when we were still sharing a house with Mel Higginbottom, I tried sending a 15-page introductory telefax to Zambia. It was in early '91, and it basically was trying to get us a job up there, and so we described BBE in glowing details. It took all day to send this 15-page fax because, of course, the line used to break down all the time. And I even found out later that the fax had not even arrived at the intended ZCCM office in Kalalushi, but at a staff canteen 10 kilometres away in Kitwe. But we must have impressed the chef, because we got the job we wanted, and indeed many more at CCM. But I think that's really all I think I should perhaps say about the olden days. If I can find the right page, I'll carry on. It's unbelievable how BBE has grown over the years. It's been now nearly a third of a century since it was started, and its expertise has developed unbelievably, I think, from purely consulting work, which it was at the beginning, to all other areas of related expertise. And it's obviously a recognised leader now in the mining industry. I think the growth in the capabilities and the rock-solid reputation it has is due to all the directors, the management, the engineers, and all the staff of the BBE Group, and indeed to all of you here. I'm getting a bit emotional. I'm very pleased that I was involved with the company from the beginning, and I think all of you should be proud of what you've achieved. Thank you for my gift and for inviting Betty and I. And we wish you, the BBE Group, all the best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Rod. That's very special. Now, the last person to come up is Stephen, and I've asked Ross Wilson to introduce him. Unfortunately, Ross is not here physically with us today, but he did record a video. So we're going to play Ross's video, and then we're going to ask Stephen to come up.
Stephen studied engineering at the University of the Witwatersrand, graduating with a BSc in mechanical engineering in 1975, following up with an MSc in 1981, a PhD in 1990, and then a PReng. Stephen joined the Chamber of Mines Research Organisation, or COMRO, after graduating, and ultimately held the position of Director of Environmental Engineering Laboratory before resigning to start BBE. Stephen worked under the greatly respected Austin Wheeler and spent many weeks at a time underground at the Hartbeesfontein mine, picking up practical experience. This was at the time when gold mines were transitioning to underground refrigeration. I asked Mark Butterworth for a few Comro tidbits and was told that he was a keen football player and a tough tackler. At Comro, he met Russell Ramsden, Frank van Glen, Rod Burton, Mark Butterworth, Tommy March, Paul Bottomley, and Everett Swartz. A very good team, if you ask me. Stephen became a respected industry expert with a solid practical grounding and a deep dislike for bureaucracy. Stephen has fought against bureaucracy at BBE as a result of this experience. As an interesting aside, Stephen was awarded a PhD in the same year BBE was started. Spray chambers were the subject of Stephen's MSc and PhD. The technology required to reliably design and build a condenser or air cooling spray chamber is an asset that BBE can thank Stephen for. So, what is it like to work with Stephen? A quote from Andrew Branch is that Stephen is the most intense man he has ever met. Stephen lives life at full volume and has a passion and drive that are an example for us all. Having had the good fortune to observe Stephen in action during the formation of BBE projects, BBE Energy, BBE Australia, BBE Canada, and BBE Laboratories, I can confirm that Stephen is a natural entrepreneur and a skilled negotiator. Engineers are often guilty of analysis paralysis, but not Stephen. Every company would benefit from a Dr. Stephen Bloom. Unfortunately, the mold used to create Stephen has been broken, and there will not be another. Stephen, thank you from all of us. Raise your glasses to Stephen. Cheers.
Thanks, Sir Ross. Thanks, Sir Ross. Stephen, if I can ask you to come up, please.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I've been asked to speak a bit about the history and the old guys. So, unfortunately, there's going to be a little bit of repetition here, but you'll get the perspective from my side, even if it is repetitive. Thank you, Wynand, and everybody for this recognition. And I think everybody's looking forward now to the celebration part of this. So we'll try and get this over with. There's also quite a nice element of surprise here, because the older guys didn't have anything to do with organising this function. I had no idea this book had come out. I had no idea this was going to play out like this. So it's fun seeing how it develops. So I've been asked to talk about the general history of BBE, particularly as regards the older guys. And although I've been asked to focus on the older guys, and I'll have to do that, please forgive me if I leave some of important names out. As you've heard, in 1976 I joined the Chamber of Mines Research Organisation, and there I first met Russell Ramsden. A few years later, both Rod and Frank joined Comro, and we basically spent the 1980s decade working very closely together as young professionals. We worked with Austin Willier and then later on with John Shear. And this group became very, very good close friends. And perhaps the closeness of the friendship can be demonstrated by a little story I'll tell you now. Sometime through the 80s, I was doing an army camp myself because I was a good South African in the army. And at the end of my camp, I had to help do a call-up for the next group in my regiment. And so I had all the papers in front of me, I had the wherewithal in front of me, and I thought, now, this is a good idea to call Dr. Rod Burton up from Wales and put him in the South African Army. So I duly did this on authenticated, it was quite naughty, on authenticated paperwork from the South African Defence Force. I invented the African foreign rifles and invited Burton to come and do a camp. there was an address, some house at in Rosettenville. I even got down to that detail. And then anyway, so I didn't hear much from Rod, but he had spent some very, very many anxious days. He even drove out to Rosettenville and had a look around to try and work out how this was going to all work. And eventually he got hold of me out of saying, please help me with this problem. And eventually I gave up and I told him. And I think Rod was more genuinely relieved than he was cross with me at the time. So Rod definitely wasn't going to the South African Army. But he might just have gone to the Navy if the call-up had gone that way. Although not the target of this talk today, Paul Bottomley's name's been mentioned, Mark Butterworth as well, was with us at Comro, and later on came Dio del Castillo. So to get to the specifics, Rod, Russell, Frank and I worked together. And as the 1980s decades passed, we had achieved a high level of knowledge on deep, hot underground mine heat flow and the associated refrigeration and ventilation systems. We had been allowed in the South African mining industry to develop ourselves, to develop our own professional expertise. We'd also been allowed to achieve some level of reputation in this regard. It really was a wonderful time in the South African mining industry. And also at this time we began to appreciate with foresight that the South African mining industry and perhaps the world itself needed a company something like the way BBE might turn out. In 1989, Rod, Frank and I started scheming, and BBE was formally started in 1990. Our first order was to design a spray chamber for Winkelhoek mine, and this order came from none other than our good friend Dio del Castillo. So good to see you here today, Dio. Indeed, we were generally well supported by the leaders in the South African mining industry at that time. There are not many of these old guys here today, but it's very nice to see you, Boda, in particular. You certainly can remember those days. It was a good, thriving industry. And thanks for the support. And of course, JC, although we'll never put you in that category from an age point of view, thank you as well for the support in Andre. And most importantly to us about that time, Richard Gunderson was one of those leaders outside of the Comro who started supporting us when we started BBE. The early 1990s was a really good time for external consulting engineers in South Africa. The big mining houses were unbundling, and there were some seriously big mining houses in our industry. They were unbundling their head offices. These head offices had housed hundreds and hundreds of engineers. You just imagine the likes of Anglo-American, Goldfields, hundreds and hundreds of very good people, but there were lots of them, and they were being unbundled. And here was a great opportunity for the external consultants. It was a time when RSV, TWP, Hatch, DRA, and the other consulting houses all grew, very much so in South Africa, because this type of consulting was foreign to South Africa, apart from that time. We were similar at BBE, and over the last 32 years, we have sustained more than a 20% average growth per annum, and every annum on average. We have also consistently grown, trained, developed, and recruited staff, and now you can see we're about 150 strong. We have also regularly, and I mean regularly, paid dividends and bonuses, probably thanks to the precedent that Rod set in the early days. We actually didn't even want to call them dividends in those days, because if you say dividends, you've got to say the word tax. So we didn't call them dividends, we used to call them windfalls. Let's have a chat today about windfalls, gentlemen. A few months after we officially started, Frank joined Rod and I, and we moved into our first real offices down in Ferndale. At the time, we were doing a lot of our work in the gold and platinum mines in this country, but we were also established in Brazil, in Zambia, and we were doing some great work in the Lesotho Highlands tunnels. And ultimately now, when we look at it, we've worked for every significant mining company and every significant mining consulting house in the world. We've established a genuinely highly specialized professional contribution. Just going through a bit of chronology here. Everett joined us in 1993, and he was our longest serving employee in his 30th year, and he's sort of semi-retired now. Russell then came in 1994, as you heard. Vicky joined us in 1995, and Vicky is our longest serving, fully active employee. I've personally worked closely with Vicky for many of these years, and it's hard to think that when Vicky started, she was only 22 years old. More than half of her life she's been at BBE. So Vicky, even if this function today is in recognition of the older guys, we must sincerely pay our recognition to you personally. Thank you. I think you've got to be the coolest, most unflappable, and most efficient BBEite that we've had. Thanks. Ray also came to BBE in 1995, then Ross in 1998. Richard eventually joined us in 1999 after some coaxing, but that was, it was nice to get to that position. And then Wynand, Mark and Andrew joined us in 2003 in terms of the earlier stuff. We worked for a long time from our converted house as offices in Ferndale. We had to build huts in the garden, and we had to fill the pool in because we needed more space. I recall Ray was located in the garage. Ross and myself were in windy huts out in the garden. Wynand and Mark's first office was in the main bedroom. And that wasn't a problem, except that it also was where the main toilet was housed. My dad was there, and Paul and his dog were in another hut, just to add to that. So the founders of BBE, and this word's come up a few times today, were entrepreneurs. And this is an important ingredient that must not be diminished as we go forward. The correct and continued entrepreneurial type growth is very important. We were also minimalistic on bureaucracy. I'm so pleased that came up a few times today as well. A trait that is worthy of some appreciation, I think. The entrepreneurial nature can be demonstrated by the following timeline. Along with the mining work we were doing in the beginning, we were often asked to assist with industrial ventilation and industrial stuff outside of mining. And this business opportunity led us to start a company called Environmental Control Engineering in 1998 with Paul Bottomley, one of our old friends from Comro. This company is still prospering, and Andrew Branchville does business with them. Incidentally, Russell Hutton worked for them for some time as well. Then the BBE laboratory was formed in 2008 and is a good business that supplies a quality service. Also in 2008, BBE took over the full IP of Vuma, which we had been sharing with Mining Tech since the Comro days. Vuma, in its earlier days, had been jointly developed with Mining Industry Research Organization. And we persevered with it, and as late as 2008, we managed to take over the full IP of it, which really was quite an achievement. And we continue to develop this core IP at the moment. In 2010, we formed BBE Energy. This was synergistic with the rest of the business, namely energy management in ventilation, refrigeration, and pumping. And over the past decade, this company has attracted very significant funding and has pioneered, I believe, the approach of shared savings in our minds. However, I sense that there's a bit of a hiatus in the bigger energy scheme of things in this country because of our government and the regulators have not, I repeat, not facilitated the process of private power deals. You might have heard all about this magnificent 10 megawatts or 100 megawatts. It just hasn't come out the pipeline. It's been in the press all the time, so it has not been facilitated. I read yesterday that the DMRE did not even know what Eskom was talking about when Eskom recently mentioned they've got a standard offer instrument, capital S, capital O, capital I, standard offer instrument for power generator. And the DMRE had never heard of it. I'd never heard of it. Have you heard of it, Jürgen? All right. It was in the press. It's what Eskom are talking about. I don't think there's going to be too much progress there until Eskom takes their hands off a few things. So we continue to hope the restrictions will lift and open up the long-anticipated opportunities, and BBE has maintained a meaningful share in the BBE Energy Company. In 2013, we opened an office in Perth, as you've heard, and more recently another one in Brisbane with Marle. Things have gone very well in Australia, and we have great expectations going forward. And thanks again to Hans and Marle for being here. In 2015, we opened an office in Sudbury in Canada. Although we had been busy in Canada for a while, the joining up of Stephen Hardcastle was a major step in developing our business in North and South America, and for that matter, Central America as well. Business-wise, things are going very well in Canada, and thanks again for Steve and Marle and their wives for being here today. But I think maybe, Wynand, we should also recognize that Steve Hardcastle is of the same generation as some of these older guys here we're recognizing today. And we have all, Frank particularly, but certainly myself, have had a long, long professional relationship with Steve over almost our full careers, in one way or the other. In 2016, we formed BBE Automation to support BBE projects, and with the long-term goal of automating Vuma Live feedback control and all the exciting goodies that go on in that space. So it's been an interesting entrepreneurial ride. And though there have been many of these types of highlights, there are two specific ones I want to finish up with. The first is that in 2004 started, and 2007 probably formalized, BBE Projects was formed. This was formed at the urging of our clients. We had been doing detailed refrigeration design for a particular client, and when it got to the implementation stage, they asked us if we wouldn't mind executing this work and following through because of the lack of skills elsewhere. We would be allowed to take a declared markup as a profit, and we'd operate as a turnkey operation. We had the skills and experience in-house in the form of Richard and Andrew and others, and we took on the job. We found it was good business, it was synergistic, and we got into it. In the beginning, it was a special core pickup team that we used to start with. JC, I think I remember using that term with you as a pickup team. Well, it's more than a pickup team now. It's a very, very well-established team. But that's how it started. BBE Projects is now executed works in South Africa, Tanzania, Ghana, Mali, Zambia, Congo, Mexico, Canada, Australia, and I've probably left out a few. And they have great prospects all over the world. Some of these jobs are quite substantial, coming in at levels of greater than 20 million US at a time. So this is quite substantial engineering construction we're talking about. Indeed, I think BBE Projects has now achieved an accumulated turnover north of 5 billion. I was doing some sums on my fingers last night, Andrew. I'm not too sure. If it's not north of 5 million, this billion is very close. So well done to Richard, Andrew, and the team. Now, while this is the money part of the business, this is a very interesting part of our greater business. This is the money part of the business. But nobody forgets that the core drive remains being the world's go-to guys in terms of underground mining advisory and underground mining consultants. This is something that Richard has grasped so well and executed so successfully, where we find that less than 20% of the staff generate a large amount of the money. And the team fully understands this model and are very happy with it and have grasped it. It's actually quite a significant thing for everybody to have got comfortable with, and it's that comfort that has allowed this to be as successful as it has. The second main event was meeting Secha and his company Achille in 2015. I can't see, so there you are, Secha. And eventually doing a deal with them, which introduced some external shareholding into our group for the first time. This created a much improved black empowerment position for us. It was something we had been committed to for some time. We had previously had 4 black engineering students on full bursaries with us. Even when we were actually a really small company, we had these four kids that we were putting through university. But the deal with Secha was on another dimension and ensured the sustainability of all of this. So Secha has been a great privilege and an honor, and we've certainly never had any regrets from our side, so thank you. So, I think we're running out of time here, but as to the future, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure BBE will be around for a long time to come as a specialist in the special niche of hot underground mining. Thanks for the support. Thanks for the hard work. It's been a great ride and it's been great fun. But I must stress that this accomplishment, if that's what you want to call it, has not been about the old guys. It's not all about the old guys. And it's not about the old guys only. The full group is an overall coherent, sustainable, and great team. And I'm sure you're all looking forward to more and more of this going forward, and I hope you have as much fun as we've had. And remember, don't forget the entrepreneurial streak and be minimalistic with the bureaucracy. Thank you. And thank you very much for the present.
It's a pleasure, Stephen. Ladies and gentlemen, as Stephen said, I think we now want to get into the celebration, but please allow us another few minutes just to finalize things. I'd like to thank these gentlemen for these personal and inspirational words. I'm not going to respond to it. You'll be able to read all about and a lot more great stories in the book that we wrote. So in closing, I just want to thank everyone that played a part in creating the book and arranging today's event. And I would like to just mention a few names very briefly. To Marle, thank you for taking on this huge task of creating the book and being our cheerleader. To Janine, there we go. Thanks, Marle. To Janine, thank you for your hard work. Where's Janine? Listening to my ideas, feeling my frustrations from time to time, and coordinating things. To Vicky, Julia, Jennifer, Andrani, and Miranda, thank you for your hard work and for collecting and gathering information secretively, so this can be a surprise. Then to Andrew, Ray, Ross, Mark, Kobus, Steve, Leon, Chris, Johan, Checha, Mike, and Evert, thank you for your valuable inputs to the book. Then to Stephen, Frank, Rod, Russell, and Richard, thank you for allowing us to interview you and sharing your great stories with us that are now captured in the book. Also to your families and friends, thank you for the amazing contributions. And then to Russell, thank you for serving as our chief editor. To Terry Brown from Logical Truth and Tiffany Markman, our copywriter, thank you for being patient and doing a fantastic job. And then to Janine and Lol and Pumzile for arranging this fantastic event. It is perfect. And lastly, just some arrangements. There are copies of the books next to the canvases. There will be 10 of them. Please go and page through them, but don't take them home. Everybody will get a book after the event. We would also like to ask our external guests at the table at the back, there's a book. Please go and fill in your mailing address so that we can send you a book. Our BBE colleagues will also have access to copies after today. Then there are also pens we're going to place at these canvases of SF, RR, and R. Please write the message on the back or put your signature there. And also the books themselves. I think it's the third page. You'll see there's a bit of handwritten note there. Please go and sign it if you would like to do so. Finally, there's a gift for everybody at the table at the back there. So when you leave this afternoon, after the celebrations, please take a gift with you. And then lastly, I just want to ask Marle to briefly come up and just give us some arrangements. There's a photo booth outside, and we're just going to take some pictures. So from me, thank you very much for coming, and we're looking forward to enjoying the afternoon with you. Thank you.
So we'd like to do a quick group photo while everybody's still looking fresh and we're all ready to look good. So what we're going to do is there's two photographers. If you can please lead, follow them outside. There's a staircase. If we can all just stand basically 20 people in a row, and then we should all be fitting in. And then please, there's a few people that are arranged with. If you can just stay behind after the group picture. And then after that, we can enjoy all the festivities here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Marle.